introduce the event to everyone who's joined us. And I would just like to say welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for a very exciting session today. You'll see what I'm talking about. I'm sure it will be quite engaging for our students and also for the others who've joined us. Just a little brief about SSG Date with the Designer. As you already know, it's an event where we have an industry expert from the design field come and interact with our students and guide the young minds in their journey through design. On behalf of SSD and Sushant University, I would like to say it is our pleasure to have Mr. Huzafa Rangwala as the guest today.
Thank
Huzafa
you.
is director and co-founder of Muse Lab, which is a design studio based in Mumbai. He's a trained architect, but he prefers the term designer. I'm sure he will bring that up during his presentation also. We're also very happy to have SSG alumni Devika Diwan take up this initiative and host the event today. She will be running this interactive session. Over to you,
Perfect.
Devika, all yours.
Thank you. Hi, Josefa. How are you? We
Good,
meet
good.
again on a
Welcome.
video call.
We meet again. Yes.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of students are there, and just to give you a little glimpse, we have majorly students from all the years, like you mentioned, from foundation till fourth, and I can see a lot of faculty also with us on the chat. And for everybody out here, being a design student and Josefa being an architect student, coming from design schools, we all know how we always think about how life is going to be once we graduate, from a design and architect school, and how projects are going to come to us, how things are going to go forward. Especially during the last couple of months, we are very skeptical about the work process. So all the students out, can you can keep asking us questions side by side on the chat box, and we'll answer them at the end. We'll have a really uh, good presentation, which Josefa is just going to start in next 2 minutes, and you're going to understand how work happens, how professionalism is taken care of when you're a designer or an architect. So, Josefa, I'm going to ask you to take over it, share your screen, give quick glimpses about you, your work, your history of what Muse Lab is all about, and
Sure.
how the journey has been for you, and how you want to encourage all the students out here.
Sounds good. All right, I'm going to take over. And
Perfect.
I hope I can keep you guys engaged for the next 20, 25 minutes.
Absolutely.
All right. Can you guys see the screen?
No.
Um,
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
we can.
Yeah. Okay.
okay, now you can, right? All
Yeah.
right. Okay. All right. So, guys, I'm Josefa Rangwala. I'm one half of our practice Muse Lab. I'm the director and co-founder. I founded this practice with my friend Jason Pirani. Today, I'm not going to talk about, a specific process or any of those things, but what I'm going to talk about is design sans scale. Essentially, it's it's about design, discussing design without any limitations or without any scale. The idea I chose this, the reason I chose this topic was primarily because, it, as students of design, you might be under, fashion design, you might be an industrial design student, you might be an architect, an interior design student, a graphic design student. It doesn't matter what major you belong to. At the end, you are a designer, right? So, and everyone works with different mediums, different technologies, different techniques, different scales. So the idea over here with today's presentation is to show the potential of what one can do as a designer, which at least we as a relatively small practice, we try to achieve in the past 8 years. Can you guys see the next screen?
Yes, sir.
All
Yes.
right, okay, great. All right. So I just wanted to confirm. Thanks, guys. So basically, if you are a student of architecture, and I'm using this word architecture only to sort of, talk about this particular screen. Um, I think you guys should be familiar with the three people on the screen. To the top left corner, this is Corbusier. Top hand corner is Zaha Hadid, and the bottom right hand corner is Ralph Zuckerberg of this firm called Graph Lab. Essentially, all three are architects by profession and also in terms of their graduation, their degrees. Um, so these are the structures that I worked on. Top left hand corner is Villa Savoy by Corbusier. Top right hand corner is the Heather Aliyev Center in Azerbaijan by Zaha Hadid, and the bottom right hand corner is a student housing in Boston by Graft Lab. The reason I'm showing these three images is because the following slide, that I'm talking about right here, to the top left-hand corner is where you see the Corbusier chaise, that he had designed. The top right-hand corner is actually a pair of shoes that were designed by Zaha Hadid using 3D printing. And the bottom right-hand corner is basically a birdhouse that was designed by Graft Lab. The reason I'm showing these two slides, that is this slide and the following slide, is to sort of tell you guys that all three are architects in terms of the education that they have received. But at the end, they have expanded their horizons and expanded their learnings in architecture school to different areas of design as well, be it furniture design, be it accessory design, be it product design. This is actually Jassim and me. The reason I put this slide is because, I just want to tell you guys that, even though both of us have masters in architecture degrees, but we don't call ourselves architects. We actually call ourselves designers. Now, the reason this entire sort of principle, was developed for our practice is because we both come from fairly large corporate practices. Jassim worked in New York for almost 6 years with Gensler. He worked on airport projects. He worked on town planning projects in London. He's a graduate from the Savannah College of Art and Design, where he did his undergrad and master's. For me, I did my undergrad in Bombay and I did my master's from the Georgia Institute of Technology, the College of Architecture. And after my graduation, I worked in Atlanta for almost 4 years, where I worked on large-scale residential and housing projects. And I also worked on master planning projects in China. Once I came back, I started working with Hafiz Contractor, on fairly large-scale projects in India itself. 2012 is when we both sort of decided to get together and start our practice. And we were very clear that when we start our practice, we did not want it to be just about, big buildings and, big projects. We wanted to actually use design as a tool to solve problems, which is really, really important. I think that's something that all of you as students of design need to understand, that design is not something, see, aesthetics is something which is, inherent. It is your taste, it is what you like, what you don't like. But when you look at design by itself, design is nothing but a method or a tool to solve problems. And you can solve any problems using design, but you can solve those problems, not just in terms of solving for the sake of it. You can solve it more creatively. So essentially, we call ourselves designers. What I'm going to do over the next 15 minutes is I'm going to take you guys quickly through some of our projects, where I'm not going to discuss process, but I am going to discuss, the different kinds of scales of projects that we have achieved in the past 8 years. So the first thing that I'm going to discuss with you guys is, master planning, where what you see right here is, we are working currently on a 40-acre township in Dehradun. So this is primarily like a township where, it's about low-cost housing, and it's housing for the economically weaker sections of societies. Typically, public housing like this is actually underlooked, and it's all about just putting in as many homes as possible without considering, space for, the habitants to interact with. So here we've taken a whole different approach where we are calling it social housing, which is where, we've developed a lot of courtyards and sort of internal spaces where, one can interact with. So this is actually a fairly large project that we are working on currently in Dehradun. The second project that I want to discuss about is another master planning project, but this is in Ossian, Rajasthan. And this is where we are building a beautiful resort in the desert. So it's very interesting. It's like an eco resort / spa, where we are building around 50 different kinds of suites, plus like 2 types of restaurants, a spa, a day club, and so on and so forth. So this is actually the scale of master planning. Next, I wanted to talk about the scale of architecture. Now, in architecture, we're doing like a lot of holiday homes, in Alibag and in Goa. So this essentially is a fairly modern, like a Philip Johnson glass house kind of a home that we've designed in Alibag. It's a very clean, singular box, with an outhouse for a dining pavilion. These are just some renders that we have created for the presentation. This is the built part of the project. Thereafter, we are working on like a very Goan Portuguese sort of a home. Obviously, this is in Goa in Avas. This is to the right, top right hand corner. This is a home that we are working on in Coimbatore, which is actually a very very sleek, Villa Savoy kind of a farmhouse. It's just with a rooftop which has a pool, and then the entire lower area is an open plan. Uh, Bottom right hand corner, this is actually a home that we are designing for a family of 30 people in Chennai. It's again a very cubist, Vastu compliant. Actually, it's more brutalist than cubist. With this whole sort of concrete facade that we're working on. And the bottom left hand corner is a proposal. It's an unbuilt project, but this is a proposal for a fairly large development in Betawade, which is sort of a neighborhood slightly north of Bombay. I just wanted to show this also. These are also some renders of some farmhouse projects that we are working on. But this is something that I want to discuss with you guys, because even though we have graduated from school and I've been practicing architecture for the past 18 years now. I've been in the profession, but we still, engage a lot in great graphics and, like making, ensuring that our presentations are on point. So it was not just about doing good presentations when we were back in school, but also now when we're presenting it to our clients, we focus on axons, exploded axons, explaining materiality, and it just adds a lot more value to the project itself, even before it's built. This is again a very different scale of project, because what we did over here is we actually built a 3,000 square feet headquarters for Zarhak Steels in Bombay itself. But this was designed inside an existing factory shed. So if you see this image at the top left-hand corner, you'll see that, you'll see the shed right here. So we designed a building inside a shed, which I think, for me as a designer, was a very exciting intervention, because typically you always get a plot and it's, which is open to sky. But in this case, it was something that we had to build inside a factory shed. So these are just some images from that particular project. Next, I wanted to discuss with you is a project that we worked on, which is adaptive reuse. So what you see over here to the bottom left-hand corner is actually a derelict hotel that, one of my clients from Muscat had purchased. And this is the actual state of it when we went for a first site visit. It was a rundown hotel on the old Bombay-Pune highway. And the other three images that you see is what we sort of bought it to, right? So adaptive reuse or refurbishment is essentially a process which is, a sustainable way of, intervening in design, right? Where you're not like just building for the sake of it, because we actually retained the entire structure. We retained everything. We just gave it a facelift. We added this brick wall right here, wherever the ducts were there. And we refurbished the project. We used local labor, local materials. So in a way, I won't call it like a green project, but yes, it was definitely sustainable in terms of how we built it. So this is where, I want to talk about, let's say, an adaptive reuse project, or a project where we worked on refurbishment principles. Now, when it comes to interiors, this is actually our own office in Bombay. It's actually a very small office, the lower level is just 144 square feet and the upper loft is 100 square feet. So I'm talking about just 250 square feet of space in which we are 8 of us who sit and, we work in this sort of, space. And, the outside facade is actually this really beautiful screen that we created. And you can see that over here, top right-hand corner, that's how it is on the inside. We wanted to give an identity to our office. And also the beauty about the screen is that because there are 3 different types of modules, as you can see, there are circular cutouts, there are pivoted circles, and then there are also hinge circles. So every time, a car passes on the outside or the leaves of the trees flutter, we get these beautiful light and shadow, movements within our office, and it just adds a lot of life to our office space. And the bottom, this is where you see the interiors of the office. So the entire interiors is nothing but all in birch ply. And in fact, what you see right here, this railing leads to the upper loft. And this loft, what you see on the right over here, it was actually a railing also. But we removed the railing and we actually converted it into a library slash, material bank for us, which you see right here. So this is our office. This is again a very different project where we explored with the idea of maximalism. For most of you are aware of minimalism. This is the exact opposite of it, where more is more instead of less is more. So we do not have a particular style in design. I think that's something that we were very clear with, that we don't have a language. When you see our projects, they're all very different scales, different styles, different materials, because we love to learn. We are very hungry to learn. And we feel that if we do the same thing, although it might become our statement and our aesthetic by which we are identified, but then what else are we doing? Are we learning anything else? So we consciously as a practice decided that if we are entering into design in different directions, then we want to explore different styles as well. So this is maximalism. It was a very interesting old colonial bungalow where if you see on the floor of this image right here on the top left hand corner, we actually designed a contemporary rangoli. So the entire floor was built in cement terrazzo, and it steps down over here. This unit right here is actually a unit which stores all the crockery and everything, and it's all built in Nigerian teak, and they're all CNC mill shutters. So some are shutters, some are drawers which actually open up. This table right here is actually a thalassa table, Greek thalassa table, and we've done inlay with precious stones. And to the bottom left-hand corner is just the image of the dining room. Right here, I wanted to show you guys, just two images of two boutiques that we've done. So the top two images are actually a part of my mom's boutique. She designs abayas, which is actually like a traditional wear for Muslim women. And, she has a lot of karigars in her workshop as well. So what we did was we actually created these panels in a perforated cement sheet. And then we collaborated with her karigars to actually create this beautiful cross-stitch pattern, which actually envelopes the entire boutique. So this also becomes a very sustainable way of engaging with your craftsmen, rather than just always relying on, let's say, other people, and factory finished things. Here, this is something that we worked with my mom's own craftsmen. So we designed this boutique. On the bottom, these two images are actually for a very young design atelier. Actually, she's a fashion designer, and we created this. So it's all about when you go shopping, it's literally like a shopping arcade. So what we did was we created these pink arches, right? And each arch actually contains the clothes which are suspended over here. And that was the intent of the design. And if you look at the bottom right hand corner, this image right here is actually a changing room. So we designed the changing room also like a jewel box. The idea is that it's the only sort of emerald green suede color, that pop of color that's existing in this entire space, which is otherwise very pristine. So this is also a part of our interiors project. Then the top two images that you see right here is actually for a large 7,000 square feet home in Pune, where, typically transition spaces are extremely boring, like when you talk about foyers or passages. In this case, we celebrated the transition spaces. So if you see right here, there is a beautiful houndstooth pattern on the floor using piccolo tiles. We've actually put a rug on the wall, which is designed by us as well. We collaborated with some artisans in Varanasi to design this rug. To the right is the bedroom of the eldest son. So we love playing with patterns, colors. That's actually what our forte is. You'll see that all our projects, whether it's design at any level, it's always very quirky and very whimsical and very playful. The bottom two images are actually a clinic that we did it for a cancer surgeon. He's actually one of India's top oncologists who happened to wanted to a clinic for himself. And cancer clinics typically are extremely sort of, they're very typical, they're very morose, and they're very sort of, gloomy, right? But in this case, we said, okay, what? Let's flip it and let's make it a happy space, right? Because, you don't want a patient to feel even more dejected when he or she already is because of, whatever they have. So we designed this entire sort of space to have a very happy vibe, to have a very bright vibe, using piccolo tiles on the wall. The furniture is also very trendy and very minimal, very clean. In fact, on the bottom right hand corner, this is actually a seating that we've designed, which is in cane. Even the fabric that we've used is all sort of, it's microbial fabric with nanotechnology, so that it's all easily washed and maintained. So guys, this is actually a couple of our interiors projects. Next, what I wanted to very quickly discuss with you is competitions. Now, competitions is also something that I would highly encourage all of you guys as students to participate in. We participated in these as students. Like when I was at Georgia Tech, I participated in competitions. In fact, when I was at the Academy of Architecture, along with two of my friends, we were actually the first people to win the Indian National Steel Design and Growth Competition for students. This is way back in 2001. I love winning competitions, if I may say so. So in fact, this is a recent competition that we won in March 2012, which was actually a global coronavirus competition. We were placed first, Brazil was second, and US was third. In terms of the winning entries, and we had to design a response to the pandemic. And what we thought was that we as architects, as designers, we can easily sort of we cannot be on the front line in terms of helping helping with loss of lives, right? We can't do that, but we can at least prevent loss of livelihood. So which is why we actually designed a hand cart, which can be used not only, which can be used anywhere in the world. So it's made in bamboo, it has like a refrigeration system, there is a solar panel on top. So it's using cyclic materials, using sustainable materials. And that's, so there's more to it. It's all there on our Instagram, but I will not go into too much details. If you look up for it, you'll find more details on this. Another competition that we participated in is actually this home that we are building for a family of 15 in rural Tanzania, in this town, village town called Karatu, where, again, it's actually a home where in 20,000 euros, we had to build a home with 6 bedrooms, a living dining space, plus a toilet. And, we had to give like a BOQ, we had to do an entire calculation of cost, understand materials which are available locally, design it in a way which is, with indigenous local techniques. So I think this is actually what, also kept us going through the lockdown, where, we worked on a lot of design competitions. The other scale that we really enjoy working on is furniture, so this actually is like furniture from our latest collection, which we launched last year. It's called the Hedonist Collection. So very quickly, like if you look at this table, it is very architectural. At the end, that's what our degree is in architecture, so a little bit of that form-based influence comes in our furniture as well. So the idea of this furniture, which is actually a coffee table, is that, it appears to rest only on one point and then it rises all around and reaches this point. But the entire piece of wood is actually resting on a cylinder over here, which is a glass cylinder. So when you're actually walking around the coffee table, it seems like the entire coffee table is, resting on one point and the rest of it is levitating. Similarly, we designed this chair, which is in beech wood with a very simple metal back. We focus a lot on ergonomics, so we understand, human scale, which is why, when you look at designing at different scales, right from how a person would experience a space to how a person would experience a furniture, there are two very different ways of looking at scales, and which is what we enjoy exploring. So if you look at the furniture also, this is like a high chair, a low chair right here, in a very loud sort of fun color. It's in fuchsia and, in teal. We've designed a mirror. We've designed like another chair right here, which is called Nougat 2. And this is again a bunch of other pieces, a console. This is like basically an armchair. This is one of my favorite pieces right here. It's called Cane Crush, where ideally, if you look at a chaise, it's a singular piece, but we kind of, fragmented it into an armchair and a footstool. So it's visually disconnected, but it's physically connected at the base, so it's almost like a chaise, but it's also an armchair and a footstool. And these are like some coffee tables that we've designed right here. To the top left-hand corner, this is again a coffee table, which is resting on 2 legs. Typically, you'll have tables which are resting on 3 legs, but in this case, it's resting only on 2 legs. Where we use metal and we use a process of hand hammering to create this double helix. This is a dining table, and this right here on the bottom is actually an interesting piece that we are calling the pet table, which, actually works as a dining table slash, writing table, but also serves as a space where your pets can, be a part of it. We also do a lot of installations, guys. So, this is an installation that we designed for the Amsterdam Light Festival this year, where we actually created trees as a means of replacing deforestation and loss of trees in urban areas. As we all know, I mean, if you look at Bombay itself, you look at Delhi itself, we lost a lot of trees. How do we replace it? So what we did was we created these trees, which are actually made up of a series of test tubes, which contain algae. If you guys know, algae is the smallest organism, and also if you have a tree which is, let's say, of a certain diameter, let's say a tree is of an 8 meter diameter foliage, the amount of carbon dioxide that a tree of that size can absorb, the similar area of algae can actually absorb 40 times more carbon dioxide than that. So essentially, these are actually very beneficial. It's just that we don't know a lot more about algae. So we designed these trees, which actually are powered by solar panels also on top. So during the day, the algae are naturally activated because of sunlight, but at night, the solar panels take over and they still give light to the algae because of the lights just immediately between the solar panels and the test tubes. So the idea was to create these installations across the city of Amsterdam. Of course, we did not win it, but it was a great learning for us as well. This is something that we built for Godrej in Bombay, where we designed these terrariums. If you guys are all aware of what a terrarium is, it's like a small little object which contains plants which you typically keep in your homes. But we designed these habitable terrariums which occupy the landscape of Godrej Vikhroli in Bombay. And you can actually enter these, you can read, you can chat with friends, and they're all surrounded by air purifying plants. We've also designed, an installation for the Biennale in Jaipur, which is currently under construction. And this is something that we designed last year for ACE exhibitions in Bombay. The installation is called Look Up, Look Around. Essentially, the whole idea was to, ask people and to encourage people to look up from their cell phones and their touchscreens and to look around and interact with people. So if you see, there is a series of periscopes that we designed which convolute around each other. And basically, like everyone, like if this guy's standing and looking here and I'm standing, I can actually look at him and, have like a visual interaction. In some cases, it was, more of a having a conversation and so on and so forth. So these are installations that we worked on. And finally, the last batch of, things that I want to discuss with you is that we also do a lot of products and accessories. So in the past 8 years, we have designed concrete basins, right here is a fluid series basin. This right here is something that we're working on with Rammed Earth. We've designed coasters and tiles right here at the bottom. These are all inspired by, the gardens of Renaissance era, which are like the hedge maze gardens. So these coasters are all in concrete. We've designed rugs, so we've actually been to Varanasi and Jaipur and we've worked with artisans to create these beautiful rugs. On the right side, these are called the carpet of souls. In the middle, these are rugs that are inspired from all the stepwells. And these rugs over here are all called the shapeshifter rugs. And you'll see them on the left side, how we use them in a few sites. We've also designed a modular wine rack, which you see right here. So this is actually built in birch ply, where we've actually CNC milled 19 birch ply, laminated them together to form this beautiful sort of module, which can actually stack up and, it can be used to keep wine. And, so it can work individually or it can work collectively. We've also designed diaries, which have been inspired by windows of the world. And this small little diary right here is actually where we put, Bansky's Balloon Girl and, sort of superimposed it on one of the Greek arches. Again, it's just, the idea is that you make it in birch ply. The diary can be reused over and over again. And if you're tired of using it after you used it once, you can frame it and, it becomes art on your wall as well. We've also designed wall hooks, using buildings that we love. So whenever I used to look at wall hooks, I would be like, this is like the most boring thing, that's there in my house. How can I make it more fun, more interactive? So what we did was we spent actually a good 8 to 10 months, where we worked on basically a lot of, these objects. We worked on these, we identified different buildings, which in terms of the architecture. So this is Kanchenjunga in Bombay. This is Mondadori's building in Brazil. There is Corbusier's Palace of Assembly in Chandigarh, and there is Michael Graves' library in Denver. So we identified these four buildings as being the perfect buildings that can be adapted into wall hooks. So, we've also designed them in a way that they can take up to load of at least 3.5 to 4 kilos. So a lot of research goes into, when you're designing products and accessories as well. On the bottom, what you see, these three images, we've designed lights as well. So it's important, because when you're designing lights, you need to understand lux level. You need to understand what it is doing to enhance the mood of the ambience. So here it was very simple. We worked with some craftsmen to create these lights in cane and in metal. So what you see is a wall sconce, a wall hanging light, and also a floor lamp. And we are calling these as the reading light. When I say reading, there's a pun on the word because they're obviously looking like books. So it's also about reading a book. But also the thing is that it's, we're calling them basically, we're also calling them as reading lights. Reading essentially is when you're weaving screens, right? So it's READING. That's what reading actually stands for. Right here, what you see is basically, we also designed wall art for kids. So it's like, where we identify these characters. So what you see right here is actually a bear in polar ice caps, right? So this is Bobo the bear. Similarly, there's Freddy the frog, and there is, Lenny the lion. The idea is that when toddlers are, between 3 and 4 years old, and you design like this sort of a beautiful Scandinavian art piece, it almost becomes like an interactive session for them where, they need to find where the bear is, or they need to find where the frog is, because they're all built with these similar modules and birch ply scallops. What you see on the bottom is where, we design these beautiful coasters where we spend almost a year in research and development to create coasters which are literally zero wastage. So the idea, so you see these coasters, they're all made in 3mm birch ply. So basically, this is the Moonstruck series, this is the Deception series. And then we also sort of, enlarge these coasters to form trivets. So we work on these as well. This is something that does not belong to me, to our firm, but this is actually a friend of ours who is an architect who's also engaging with fashion designers to create something, which is fashion, which is more architectural and structural. So if you see, there is a lot of the design development process itself shows how, from where they are to where it is, there's a lot of structure given in terms of how these garments have been fabricated. And then, we're also working with some artisans in Channapatna to create these beautiful toys, which are all made in wood. So this is using vegetable dye and wood. So we've created these modular toys, which is also going to be a part of this installation at the Mill Owners Association and Raw Collaborative at end of this year. So we also design toys. So basically, I mean, if you see right from, master planning, designing a township in Dehradun to designing toys with Channapatna artists. I mean, if you see, there is a wide range of, scale that we've dabbled with.
There is nothing which you've left when it comes to architecture and design, Huzaifar.
We have
it's pretty much covering everything possible. Like
yes.
every time I learn, every time I hear you and I see your project. So I'm sure the students must be going crazy right now, seeing such an inspiration. Okay, I'll let you complete the slide.
Yes, so guys, this is just the last slide where what we did was, so during the lockdown, we realized that everyone's like pretty much, at home and everyone's going through different moods. So what we did was we launched this sort of a global collaboration where we reached out to 20 architects internationally. And I'm talking about architects in Pakistan, in Syria, in Peru, in Colombia, in Norway, and similarly we reached out to these and we actually spent like a good 2 weeks curating this list of people who we wanted to invite. And along with that, we also invited a lot of young firms in India itself to create this sort of a global collaboration, which we are calling as Exquisite Corpses or Cadaver Exquis. It's based on a French game where essentially, you draw something and you give it to the next person and the next person takes it from there and builds something. So eventually what is drawn, it's almost like Chinese whispers, but, with sketches. So we sort of translated that into this game where we created these cubes and we gave all the participants just 3 surfaces, 2 walls and a floor. And we asked them to reinterpret those 2 walls and floors in their own way in the form of a room. And once we got those, we then, by just different permutations and combinations, we created these sort of sets and septets, essentially to just show. So this is basically from Manzil Architects in Pakistan. This is Ru Architects from Norway. This is basically from an architect in Medellin, Colombia. This is Dot in Delhi. This is Iksoy in Ahmedabad. And this actually is, I forget the name of the practice, but they're Bombay-based practice, Studio Damn, I forgot. I'm so sorry. But what you see right here is a beautiful collaboration of, people where who would have known if someone from Delhi would actually collaborate with someone, from Islamabad, or who would have known that someone from Bombay would actually collaborate with someone, who's sitting down there in Syria, right? But this forged new relationships, it fostered new friendships. And it is because as a practice, we felt that now that we are 8 years in the industry, right? Forge these relationships with people across the world. And now, everyone's talking amongst themselves, and we don't know what new collaborations they will come up with. But I think this is basically another scale of design that we also ventured with. So yeah, I would just like to end it with
Are
this
you
one word, design, because design is, it's overwhelming, it's exhausting. Like, I'm exhausted talking about everything that I've done, and I'm surprised that I've done so much in the past 8 years, with my team, with my office, with Jasim, right? But the sky is the limit, and I mean, you guys, what's beautiful about you guys and your school is that you're already a mix of so many amazing disciplines. And imagine the kind of things that can come out from your school the minute you guys start, putting heads together and collaborating. So I'm done with my presentation. I hope I was on time, Devika.
absolutely come? I think
Okay,
now we'll start and we'll talk about. So we're getting a lot of questions already. I can see a lot of questions pouring in, and
sure.
I mean, like I said, every time starting, it's like a process, and the way you explain from your master planning till your products, interiors, products, even like toys and coasters. There's so many times when I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. We stop ourselves from, targeting smaller products, thinking, but there's so many things you can even learn, and shapes and materials you can use. And then, like you rightly said, the whole collaboration part, um Huzafa, one thing, which is my question, and I think that all the students really want to hear about it. You explain the entire process. Just one quickly before I take up the questions, how important, and it is important, you'll agree that to collaborate even and always think during college time also that, irrespective of you doing a fashion degree or interiors, you have to work together and you can always switch your vertical, It's not important that if you've done interiors, you cannot get into a product line in future. How would you explain that to the students?
I think it's really important. The thing is that gone are the days when we were, sort of so scared about changing a degree because we were like, what's going to happen to us? I've spent 5 years studying architecture, for instance, and what if I go on to do something which is completely different? Like, I know today that the Alibag home that I showed you guys is actually for a client who's a friend who studied architecture with me and now has gone and become like a global jewelry designer, right? And he's
Oh,
real estate now. So you can think about that the potentials are limitless. Like, I was telling someone the other day that there are so many architects who are stepping out and working with Pixar and designing. Like, you might be doing like animation for, let's say, Black Panther, and you might be creating,
hmm,
right? So
yeah,
the I mean, there is no limit to what you can do. So yes, but it's important to be focused. You can't be like, okay, I did 1 year of graphic design and I don't like it, and then
yeah,
I'm doing fashion design, and then the third year I'm doing architecture, because no, you are then playing with time and money and everything else. Your resources are limited at the end of the day, and you need to be more focused. Which is why it's important that the time between school and starting of the next semester, take those 2 3 months off to do your research, and rather than whiling away, figure out what you want to do if you're serious. That is, what you want to do with your future and with your career.
true. You basically make your mark in one industry, and then you keep like branching it out accordingly over the period
Yes,
of time.
of
Yeah.
course, yeah.
Correct. Was there another thing? I think during the presentation you were showing a lot of, even being a design student, what was that software you were showing that, you can always get in that playfulness through the sketches? So, usually what happens is there's so many of them now that students many times like, okay, we know AutoCAD, we know SketchUp, we know Photoshop. Just to put it easily that, if you know these three, four softwares, what you use, because you've shown a process of your work and also what
Right.
was that software. I think that is something, which gives a little playful to and a little aesthetic appeal to the entire project, you know.
Right. So we
Just talking
definitely
about
use
software.
Lumion. Yeah. So Lumion is what we use. Basically, we work with. I mean, there's CAD, there's Photoshop, there is SketchUp. All our modeling done in SketchUp, and then we render in Lumion. And sometimes when you want photorealistic renders, we do like V-Ray, SketchUp and V-Ray. But I
Okay.
think on right now, for conceptual renders has worked really well for us because it gives there are some beautiful filters, and you can achieve a lot. And I think I think it's also about taking inspiration from these different Instagram accounts like Art Solution. There is there is Crazy Architecture. There is Illustrarc. So there are these various accounts which you can refer to on Instagram to understand what people are doing across the world and how they are presenting their
Yeah,
their designs, their portfolios. Go to MIT,
correct.
go to Columbia's page. The students there are doing some amazing work presentation.
True. I think somebody was asking, Josefa, where is the hospital project you were showing us?
Right. So actually, it's not a hospital. It's a clinic. It's an
Yeah.
oncology clinic that's in Bombay at Opera House.
Okay, so Navya, I think you were asking, so that's not a hospital, it's a clinic. And the way you've done the clinic with so many colors, I think when you really understand the core about it, that the colors really play a matter. So I had another question, how important it is for you, when we think about materials, because material is a very generic term, irrespective of being an interior designer, an architect, or product.
Right.
Do you think the whole aesthetics can be added just by the material? Because I really loved in one of your competitions, you've done that entire cabinet which has different drawers and you've played with materials in a 3D way. But at the same time, a lot of times, when we think about in the new times, that students also, they think, when we take wood and we add color to it, it'll add aesthetic beauty. But do you think materials played in different forms is also important than always using materials with a color adding on it?
So, if I'm understanding it right, so let's say, when you're looking at a material like bamboo, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You can stain bamboo. You can also, put like PU on bamboo. But if you put
true,
PU on bamboo, it's just going to ruin, what bamboo is all about, right? Because it is
correct.
like material, it's sustainable, and you want it to retain its natural essence, right? In some way.
Yeah,
So that's why if you want to stain it with like a vegetable dye or a natural color, that's something that's still doable. Um,
correct.
if you can say that, I think your question is more about using materials in different colors, right?
In
Or
different colors, because usually we use materials and then we just to add the entire design part, we add a color. But like you
correct,
rightly said,
correct.
whether even if you take bamboo or even if you take like birch ply, you've taken that, you've used that term a couple of times during your
Right,
presentation, be
right,
it your office, be it your coasters. But that kind
right,
of a material in itself only has a certain aesthetic. So even if you
correct.
don't add like a color on it, the material only is very appealing, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I
So
think that's
so
what it is. So when you're looking at material, in some cases, material itself is so beautiful that you don't want to do anything more to it, right? You
true.
just sort of use it in its pure form and then basically complement it with something with a color or something like that. So I think,
Correct.
and I think that that's really important, definitely.
Yeah. I think to all the students, because we always run away as design students from understanding materials. It's like, over the time we learn, it's very important to know about your materials. And that's only you'll know how to eventually use it, whether you're doing any sort of design.
Interestingly, that you're talking about it,
Yeah,
material is also another different field that people are now venturing into. People are now designing materials. You know,
correct.
People are designing materials out of waste. Like there is this amazing firm in Chennai called Samsara. What they have done is
Mhm.
they're now creating partitions made of waste plastic. So you can have
Wow.
those partitions, and they are fire resistant, and they are insulated for heat and sound and whatnot. And it's great. So they design that material, right? So material design is also an important sort of an up and coming line of career.
Correct. Correct. Okay, so I'm just going to go to questions and link it to. So
Sure.
somebody is asking us, what comes first in design, aesthetics or communication or functionality?
So for me, it's always about function.
So
I
it's Sachin asking us. Sachin is a student at SSB.
Oh, hi Sachin.
Yeah.
For me, it's always about function. I mean, form follows function always. Aesthetics follow function always. Because when it comes to, let's say, at the end, you are designing this for someone, right? And the person,
Mm.
those people are going to inhabit that space or experience that space. and if it is not designed for correctly, then you as a designer, you're going to be cursed for the rest of your life, right? And you don't want that happening at any point of your career. So for me, that is important. I mean, think about it this way, that if you have this beautiful couch that you design for your den, but it is facing the wall instead of facing the TV, it doesn't make sense, right? I mean, that completely, throws everything out of question. So basically, the idea is that, at the same time, it's not about becoming prisoners of the plan, right? A lot of times what happens is that because we are so much focusing on function and about circulation and all these things, that we get boggled by the plan and we forget to think about it in the third dimension. So it's about how you balance it. Yes,
Okay,
you.
so Josefa, just to correct you, I forgot. Sachin is the HOD of visual communication at SSD. So you were actually talking to your faculty.
Hello, sorry. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question. That's exactly that's what I feel about form and sort of aesthetics. And when it
Correct.
comes to communications, I think what communications does is it sort of it ties down your design in a way. Like, and I believe when you say communications, you're talking about it more in terms of visual communications, right? Like VR,
Yes.
like that. Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
So, so it
More towards
definitely
graphics, actually, more towards graphics and
more
towards
towards
the whole.
graphics, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think today, like, there are many whenever. So for instance, let's look at the onco clinic. The clinic that I designed for the doctor. It was so important to have the right, sort of logos, the right sort of fonts, right, the right
True.
typeface, even for designing, the right from the signage to even what was placed outside every door, leading to a consultation room or leading to, let's say, the procedure room or the blood collection room or whatever it is. We actually went about designing the graphics, also the logos, also for these different things. So yes, I mean, visual communication is important, but I think if you have to talk about it in order of what it is, it's definitely function first for me, and then
Okay.
the other two definitely support function.
Correct. Correct. Makes a lot of sense.
I might not be
Uh,
completely correct. This is just an opinion.
I mean, I think it's a choice at the end of the day, but you know
Yeah,
how the design is very
yeah.
personal. So we have Malika asking, how do you decide which projects are good fit for you and your firm? Are you picky about them? Do you choose them, or is just what comes around to you?
So we never choose our. I mean, basically, we are not picky about our projects. But yes, I mean, at some point, that when you're stepping into a project, and with due respect to all my developer clients, there's nothing wrong with working for a project, for a developer. But what happens is that all clients come to you with different limitations. Like, for example, when a developer comes to you with a project, there is a certain value that you need to generate. It's more of bang for a buck, right? So they have real estate, they have like a certain timeline, XYZ. So that project is more time bound, and it might not be as exciting in terms of a designer, right? But
Hmm.
it's up to you how you make it exciting so that it can work for you. And
Correct.
if there is a project where you are designing, let's say, a home for an artist, which is like a single home, the artist wants a home which is like, like zero waste and, using natural materials. It's going to be a that you will remember for the rest of your life. But also, it's not something that will be done in, like a year. It might go on for 3 years.
True.
So I think we do not reject any projects. We are not picky about projects. We try to make those hours because, at the end, we all need work, right? I mean, we all need work.
Correct. Absolutely. Work is important, especially after the whole COVID situation. So we have a really interesting question. What was your inspiration for the reading lamp, the reading light? I think which was shown here.
It was actually just books, right? I mean, we were just sitting and
Yes.
meeting, and we were like, don't judge a book by its cover, right?
Yeah.
Uh, we are just go, like, we're like, okay, how interesting would it be? Because we're flipping through books, right? And we're like, okay,
Yeah.
creating this really beautiful form, and we're like, okay, let's just make it into, let's see if we can make it into a light, and we
Yeah.
explore. I mean, that light itself, just the prototyping took us like a good 4 months because we were working with cane and
Hmm.
metal, and especially understanding light
Oh,
itself. Yeah. So I think that's the inspiration was definitely a book, and that's what it was. Yeah.
true. So I think this is a very common question nowadays. Can modern architecture be affordable for a client with limited budget?
Of course, it can be. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's just about you being intelligent in terms of how you manage your resources in terms of materials. See, it all depends on, let's say, now the background that I come from, because I was working with larger practices with, like the budgets were sort of, like endless, right? So
Hmm.
when I started my own practice, it was very difficult to start, working on a smaller budget, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, it only came with learning that yes, if you sort of, and I learned a lot from my contractors also, right, in terms of how you
True.
manage your resources, you manage your materials, without obviously compromising on quality, on aesthetics. And today, you can use the most basics of materials and it can just be so beautifully used. I mean, it's just because at the end it's all about, like when you talk about materials, it's all about tangibles, it's all about touch, feel, and all those kind of experiences.
True.
So architecture can definitely be affordable. I mean, I think today you can build a home in even, anywhere between like 800 to 1200 rupees per square feet, in, I would say, like a semi urban setting, and in a rural
Hmm.
you can also build it at 400 rupees per square feet.
True, true. I think that makes sense. So, we have a similar question which actually links to what you said. So, somebody's saying, I have to get a small three-bedroom house constructed on a 700 square yards plot in Gurgaon, and minimalistic and concrete type of look is that thing, but they have a limited budget. So, again,
Yeah.
linking to our past question and answer, how do you understand costing for such a project? So, the costing which you just gave us, do you think that is also applicable for this kind of a structure if somebody is looking at, if a client is looking at, with pocket friendly, and again minimalistic but modern.
Okay. So interestingly, if it is, let's say, 700 square yards, I'm talking about around 6,000 square feet of land space.
Yeah.
If you're leaving offsets and everything, let's say you're even building maybe 2,000 square feet of land, of let's say a home. It's a
Mm-hmm.
three bedroom apartment. So I'm saying a three-bedroom home. So I'm saying to be around 2000 square feet. Now, for 2000 square feet, if you're looking at architecture and interiors on a budget, and I'm not talking about a pool or any of those things, with like very basic organic landscape, you can build, the entire thing in anywhere between 2500 to 3000 rupees per square feet. And yeah, I think that should be good, because if it's a bare plot, you also need to consider, like infrastructure coming to the plot. I think what happens is with like a standalone plot is that a lot of the money goes into site infrastructure, because
Yeah.
you would want to employ rainwater harvesting, you would want to employ, like a solar panel, right? Because you want to take care of these natural resources. I think we've all learned now that we need to take advantage of all our natural resources. So I think the initial cost definitely would be a little higher, right? But 2500 to 3000 rupees per square feet should be on the higher side, good enough. And by interiors, I'm not talking about, you'll be putting marble. Yeah, you can basically use like your Shabbat flooring or Karap flooring, or you can use
नहीं
basic
यार,
texture paints.
बहुत पेट भर जाएगा मेरा। फूड खा लिया ना, तबीयत खराब हो जाएगी ना।
Okay.
Somebody is talking. Can somebody please shut the uh okay, yeah, I think that's done. Okay, so Josefa, we have our Dean asking that
Yes.
is an architect affordable? And she means when you talk about large sections of society.
So I think an architect, from what I've learned in the past, 6 months, very honestly, I've learned a lot in the last 6 months, because we have interacted with many people. Like I've interacted with architects who are working on the ground with, communities, working with local craftsmen. And also when we did the Tanzania project. So the idea is that as an architect, if you are an architect for a client, then obviously you're going to charge a fee, and you're going to, sort of, design, and that's going to be an expensive affair. But if as an architect, you're also an educator, and you sort of shift your role in terms of educating a community of people, teaching them how to build, teaching them how to construct, teaching them how to sort of manage their resources, and, do those kind of things, then definitely you're not expensive and you're very much affordable, because all that you're spending your time on is, giving education to people who don't have it, and educate them in a way where tomorrow they can actually, teach to other members of their community, and they can build more homes. I think that's the way to
True.
go. And that's the only way where, you as an architect can end up becoming affordable, because I think that's how I see it. I don't know if I've
True.
answered this question.
Yeah, I think we're going to ask her in the end. That is
Okay.
the Dean's
No, I
answer.
can reply now if you want a little bit. But yes, yes, I think it opens up a whole interesting discussion. Maybe we have to start now relooking at syllabus and how to train an architect so that you can go out further to train large sections of your community, right? And actually be relevant. Not just
Absolutely.
architects, designers.
Designers. Yes.
Designers, yes. And the thing is, man, that when I was in the US and, at the time that I was there, Katrina had hit New Orleans, the hurricane, which had really like created a lot of havoc. So I had actually worked with Habitat for Humanity, where we've gone down, we helped people for 3 months when we built homes over there. It was just another learning for me, but we've done that, with our own hands. So I think it's very much possible today. There are many organizations that need hands, right? And what better than students from design school who can actually go and basically serve community time for those 2 or 3 months of vacation, or their internships also. Like, I would really encourage students to take up internships where they can actually go up north and work with DD contractor and learn how to build homes in Dharamsala and in and around, right? Go down south and work with Vinu Daniels, who's actually building homes, like I would call myself, basically, I'm not a real architect. I'll be very honest, because I'm not like sort of your, how do I say? I mean, I design, I do good work. I'm happy with that. But at the end of the day, if there is a section of students who really want to do something benefit the community, and that's the way to go.
Absolutely. I think, ma'am, I'm just going to take up this question. So,
Yes.
Zephyr, you like, right, it's again comes from what you were just answering us. So, for students, how do they start their own firm? I think we've spoken about this a lot of times before. Starting a own firm, like how does one start? Designing houses or knowns is the only option. Like, how does one start? Getting out of the design college and they want to have become like a firm in themselves.
Right. So I think it's actually I'll take at least 5 to 7 minutes to talk about this. Or maybe I'll
Yes.
try to address it. The idea is that if you're starting out on your own, you definitely need experience, right? If you know that there is a certain sort of direction that you want to go in, it's very, very important to take those 1 or 2 years to work with that person, right? I always encourage the people who come to work with us, to ask us questions also, so that we know that if they're spending 2 years working with our practice, they're going to benefit after those 2 years. Whether they're going to do the master, they're going to start something on their own. So the first thing is to definitely get experience. The second thing is, once you've gotten your experience, while you're taking the experience, very important to know that you're not just going to get clients sitting over there. I mean, you need to make sure that you already started marketing yourself. Marketing
Yeah.
is extremely important, especially if you are a first generation architect. Like, I don't have anyone in my family or even a distant relative who was an architect, right? So, and the same applies to Jasim. So we started a practice really late. Like, I started my practice when I was 32 years old, right? So in the past 8 years, I mean, whatever we've achieved is because of what I started at 32. But I know that many of my friends who have parents as architects started out early, and that's great. I mean, it works that way for everyone. But
True.
what is important is that you need to be very clear that it's not going to happen easily. Like, it's going to take you at least a good 3 years to come to a point where you will be doing work that you like to do. For those first 3 years, you might take up a toilet project, you might take up just like a bedroom project, or might just design furniture. But what is important is simultaneously, and this is something that I would really encourage you guys to do, is keep participating in design competitions, whether it's furniture design, whether it's architecture, whether it's interiors, whether it's whatever it is. Collaborate with people, work with people, explore the country, work. I think that's the only way that you can, so don't think that, I step out of college, I'm starting my practice, and I'm going to get my first 10,000 square feet home, and I have, I'm done. No, my friends, I'm really sorry, but that's not how you're going to sustain yourself. In order to sustain yourself, you need to learn a lot more. I think 5 years is the minimum time. Let's say if you decide to start something on your own, give yourself at least 5 years, to reach to a point where you can confidently say that, yes, I can now start my own practice. The other thing is, obviously, you need to take care of so many things, man. You need your accounts in place. You need a lawyer to help you with your agreements. You need to make sure that you have the right people who are helping you, your organization. You need to have the right attitude. You cannot have a boss employee attitude. It never works in design. It never survives.
True.
Trust. the way we work with the people who work in our office, everyone has a say. Everyone is an individual. We do not, impress upon them. That relationship is extremely important between, everyone in the office. Only then good work comes out. um, I mean, I guess these are the points that are, coming on top of my head, but marketing yourself, being in touch with your editors, promoting yourself constantly, because that's the only way as a first generation architect, you will be getting yourself out there, you'll be putting yourself out there. So that's how,
True.
these are like my 2 pennies. Yeah.
I think that's such a learning for me also because it's so right. You can't boss around. You have to hear everybody out. And I love the fact that you being and also somebody wants to know that how does one become a fresher or can intern in a firm like yours. So do they mail you? How do they get in touch with you?
Yes,
Because I
yes,
think it's so
yes.
good because you hear every person who works with you, and you said during your presentation you have 8 people and you have such a cute office and everybody works together. And I remember you telling me once before that you and Jason both, you are also a part of it. So it's not that you guys are the founders. So 8 is you all together,
Correct. Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
I think that point has been a learning for me also. And I want to tell everybody you cannot work without teamwork as a designer. You just cannot. You have to be in a team.
Absolutely. Agreed,
So
agreed.
you can always mail or DM MuseLab,
Yeah, so the thing
Suji.
is, you can definitely do that. I would suggest don't DM on Instagram. Emailing is
Mail is better.
us or any firm that you're writing to. Again, this is just a very quick thing because I've got 55 of you right now on chat. Uh,
Hmm.
Learn about the firm that you want to apply to or work with. Send in a personalized, sort of a letter, right? It needs to be like a statement of purpose as to why you want to work with them. Your resume,
Hmm.
portfolio, the way you write your email, do not send out mass mailers, expecting a reply. It's not right. I think I still make it a point. We don't have an HR. I mean, for us, HR is Huzaifa Rangwala. I am the HR myself. So I mean, I do still make it a point to reply to everyone who writes to us in terms of, if you don't have a vacancy. But I think it's very important to be honest in terms of how you're sending your application, whether it's to us or
Yeah.
to a firm. You need to make that impression, and that's how we've appointed people also. For people, those who made that impression, we've said, okay, you have a personality. Okay, let's talk, let's meet, let's connect, and you're on.
True.
That's how it
So
is.
anything specific apart from like writing down a good mail, a mail and a personalized mail, because that's very important. What else do you usually see when you hire interns? Is there something you have some pointers in mind? Uh, you know,
Yes, so we definitely, when someone sends us an email, the subject of the email, obviously, like, I mean, application for the position of an interior designer or application for the
yeah,
furniture designer. That's really important. How you write your email, I mean, your email also that essentially your statement of purpose or your email actually should talk about what do you know about us as a practice, right? I mean, what do you like about us? Maybe any one project that you resonated with. Why is it that you want to work with us? How are you going to benefit when you work with us? Because see, we can easily make out when a
yeah,
letter is mass email and when a letter is personalized, right? And also
correct,
from that letter, we expect some sort of a personality to come through, right? So today, everyone who's working with us, the only reason is because we connected with them immediately over the email. And when we got over for an interview, of
hmm,
chat rather, it was just like, okay, we knew you are going to be a part of our practice. We connected now.
correct,
Even your portfolio, sending a Behance link and everything, it's just too much to again go. Yes, sometimes some things are best done the old school way. Send a PDF, and don't send 300-page PDF which ends with your photography work. We all know today everyone's a photographer. We don't want to see that, right? Yes, if that is relevant to your case study or thesis, that's a different thing. But let it be like, maybe 3 or 4 projects which summarize your work. It cannot be a lot of work. I mean, your resume has to be like not like a 3 or 4 page resume. I'm not looking at, I'm not a marriage counselor, right? I mean, I'm looking at just a simple 1 page resume which talks about
yeah,
these few things that are your strengths. So I think focus on that, guys. So even when you graduate, please spend a good 2 to 3 weeks only on your resume portfolio. Run it by your seniors, your and whoever it is, and take opinions. But it's very important.
correct, correct. I mean that's so true. You need to know about the firm where you're applying first, and then you
Absolutely.
personalize your mail. That is
Absolutely.
so. We have okay. So Mehak, I think Huzafa, you mentioned some names of Instagram accounts. a while back. I think the student
Yeah,
wants
I
to know,
just
so you
posted
can,
over here. I'll just share it over here on the group.
yeah, just share it over here. You can
Yeah.
share with me or Marina. We'll send it to the students. So a student's asking us, I want to know how can an interior architect be very careful about what materials to tap into their projects post-COVID situation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just typing something. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so they're saying what kind of materials, an interior architect can use and tap into their projects post the COVID situation.
So, I think again, what's happening is, every time something happens or people ride on it. Like right now, there is this whole phase of microbial materials, right? Which can easily
Hmm.
sanitize and blah 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 and all those things. So let's make one thing very clear, right? I mean, and I'm no expert on COVID, but viruses exist and the cold exists and whatever is there. It's just about being hygienic, with how you are sort of, handling yourself and your surroundings,
Yeah,
making sure things are clean, right? I mean, so in terms of materials, very honestly, we've not explored as much. We do know that now we're getting fabrics, we're getting laminates, we're getting veneers, which are already
yeah,
pre-treated with microbial surfaces. There is also a lot of nanotechnology being used on surfaces where, drop something, it can easily be washed off, without it getting affected, and without the fabric getting affected. But I think what's important, guys, is that start exploring, even in design, and I'm talking about all of you guys. Start exploring materials which are honest and real. Start, like I think if the young crop today consciously, because you guys are the guys going to be where I am 20 years down the line, correct? And if
hmm,
itself you guys impress upon using bamboo, impress upon using pine, impress upon using sustainable materials or circular materials, that's when this entire sort of economy will change and people will start looking at, you need to stop using pu, these are all harmful materials. You need to stop using carcinogenic materials. There are still times, like I've been shocked to know that sometimes when I visited a clinic, there is like a carcinogenic material inside a clinic which is treating a cancer patient, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
insane because no one has the knowledge. And even if sometimes people do, we as designers get so much overpowered by our clients that we say that, okay, the whole chalta hai attitude sort of comes in. And I think you guys are today, responsible rather, for how things. I don't want to be preachy right now, guys, but I'm just being very honest. I mean, there's a lot of things out there in terms of materials that is available out there. Like I said, if you guys visit, you guys need to visit the Instagram account of Shreyas More. I'm just going to write his name right here.
yeah. You can just share the name. Yeah.
Yeah, Shreyas More. He is essentially a faculty at ISDI Parsons who is working with material design, and he's using
Okay.
different things, different sort of, materials to create new materials rather. So I guess you can look it up definitely.
Okay. So, Josefa, I think you shared the names of Illustrage and
Archolution.
so, yeah, so Thamek, thank you. Okay, so Kishavi, right now, as Efa mentioned about how you can enhance your knowledge about materials. So, like he rightly said, you can keep exploring. So, he already answered to that. So, somebody is asking, Himani ma'am is actually asking, what do you recommend, realistic or post-digital renderings? Do you think it's a trend now of architectural illustrations? Should we stick to realistic or switch to illustration part as well?
So for me, it's not about the style of the renders. It's, as long as the design intent is communicated, I'm happy with
Mhm.
either or. What happens is that when it is a realistic render, you start noticing a lot of other elements and, errors, so to speak. But if it is a sketchy illustration, those sort of, seem to be overlooked, right? So for me, it's not about the style of renders. It's just that, the design needs to be communicated. Also, what I feel is that uh, when we were in school, we were always told that, all right, you need to, like, when there's a marking or a submission or a jury, it was always about, X, Y, Z needs to be there. I feel
Hmm.
now, like with like, I think we should give students different sort of ways, or I would say methods, the freedom to sort of communicate, right? So it
Hmm.
cannot be that it always has to be like, like a plan elevation section and, let's say an axon. I mean, it could literally be like a model, like an origami model. I mean, I feel like in some way, pedagogy needs to be needs to have that fine line between, you know, what is sort of, you know, pragmatic and sort of what is conceptual. You know, sometimes, you know, like we get either too conceptual or we get too pragmatic, but it's important to sort of, you know, marry those two sort of aspects. And
True.
I guess that's where this whole thing is. But answering her question, it's how it is communicated. So realistic or conceptual, sketchy, doesn't matter.
Okay, but I think you said you should explore everything, and as students, you should have every
Right.
vertical, you know, exposure is very important. I think again, you know, a lot of questions are like, what changes are going to be in the design industry post COVID? I think it's all coming normal, but would you like to just sum it up in a line
I
for
mean, guys, the
students?
thing is that, you know, yes, things have changed. Like, you know, the number of touch points have reduced. So, for instance, you know, whenever you're entering a building, right, earlier you would want to push that door open, but now, you know, it's getting into automation where people just want doors to slide open, right? Of course, you still have to sort of press that elevator button and, you know, sanitize your hand before you enter your
True.
house. But I think the number of touch points is definitely reducing. Uh, but what I honestly feel is that this is a phase. You know, I think that it is eventually we are going to come out of this, right? So although, you know, I mean, and it's surprising how it's taken over the entire world, right? We were all in this COVID bubble, but now everyone's sort of stepping out, you know, and eventually it is going to simmer down. So what my suggestion is that let design or let us not make changes to things around us in a way where once, you know, COVID sort of, you know, dies out, or let's say, you know, it simmers down, you know, that it cannot be reversed, right? So
True.
for instance, I'll give an example. When we designed the market on wheels also for the competition, all right, yes, it was designed as a response to the pandemic so that the vendors had that sort of physical distancing between them and the people who are coming to buy the produce. But at the same
Hmm.
time, COVID is over, that cart can still be used, right, by the
True.
same vendors. It's not going to like you don't have to throw it away. So design should be such that it take, like, I definitely know that right now, you know, people are going to start, you know, with in their homes itself. And I think I told this to you also, Devika, that
Hmm.
people are introducing vegetable gardens in their homes. People want to grow
Yeah.
their produce. You know, like in terms of you know, spaces also, like a school or an office building will be designed so that tomorrow, if there is a pandemic, it can be converted into a hospital, right? So
Yeah.
these are things. So flexi spaces is something that will definitely become like the need of the hour, right? Which is currently there. But yeah, let's not make a very big deal out of it. Is what I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think before I ask Jayanti ma'am and everybody to loop in, how does one get to know about the competitions? Because you know, you when you're a student, you're majorly busy in projects and you're following very lesser pages than usual when you're in the industry. So how does one reach out to, you know, are there any specific pages or any specific website you want to recommend to the students they can look up to for competitions?
I've already typed them over here.
Yeah, I
So,
can see. Yeah,
yeah.
Arc Daily is very the
Yeah.
zine, of course.
Beat Breeders is great. Arch Daily, the zine. But I mean, you know, if you guys even just Google for competitions, right, for
Yeah,
architecture, there's a whole list of things that comes up. You know, Archinect actually is really good. I'll just mention that as well. Archinect is great. So yeah, these are the links that you guys can, you know, look at. But again, I mean,
look in.
but these are, you know, just architecture related competitions. Some of them also have interiors and product and landscape related competitions. But let's say if you wanted to be specifically for furniture design or for fashion or any of those things, you'll have to just look up, you know,
Okay.
blogs accordingly. Yeah.
Perfect. So, students, if you have any other questions, you can definitely ask us. We'll probably have next 10 minutes. Anything? So we have the dean also here, ma'am. Do we have any other section you want to touch upon with
I don't
the
think
students?
I'd love to. We can go on and on, but I do think there must be a time limitation.
So
And
we have
I
next,
think
I
it's been
think,
awesome.
about 10 more minutes.
There was a question from Vasu I just saw.
Yes, how to create an understanding of right design. Okay, yeah.
uh, you know,
Okay,
this is
that's
like
I
one
want
of
I
those.
want to know the answer.
Yeah, no, it's one of those trick questions that is asked at the in the last round of the Miss World competition.
And then that's how you're finally judged upon the entire.
How to create an understanding of right design. Um, Very honestly, I don't know if everything that I've designed until now, I'm not being diplomatic about the answer, but honestly, I don't know if everything that I've created up till now is right design. Okay.
Yeah.
It has worked for the people I've designed for, is what I can say. Thankfully, of course, I've made my mistakes and I've rectified those. That's always a process of learning. But I don't think there's right design or wrong design. Design is a very individualistic thing. Okay. I mean, today there are say 50 people on this call. Each one has their own way of addressing a problem. So when asked to design a home, or let's say asked to design a bicycle, or even to paint a scene of nature, we all will do it differently, right? There is no correct process for painting a scene, with two mountains, a sun, and a river, right? Or to design a bicycle. I mean, of course, you need to make sure that the bicycle works and no one just falls off, that it has like 2 wheels or 3 wheels, or if it's 1 wheel, then you need to like make sure that the person can balance when, the user can balance the bicycle. So I think there is nothing that I would, there is no such thing as right design. It is good design or it is bad design. All right. And in both the cases, it has to do with, the end user. I'll just give one more example. Let's say today, if I'm designing a toilet, which is not an accessible toilet, it's a regular toilet, which let's say, anyone can use, right? But tomorrow, and it works brilliantly, for a man or a woman. But tomorrow, if there is someone who is, physically challenged and is on a wheelchair, and that person cannot enter the toilet, so your good design becomes bad design. That does not mean that your good design is wrong design. It is still a right design, but it is bad design for the user. That makes sense, right?
Absolutely, yes.
I think so. So it's very relative word. I don't think you can sort of, put it under the umbrella of right or wrong. Yeah.
And that doesn't make you a good designer or a bad designer. I
It
think
does not,
every
no.
designer makes mistakes. That's how
Yeah.
you learn.
Yeah. As long as you acknowledge it and you are willing to work harder to rectify it, that's fine, because you will get feedback and you need to be ready for that criticism. I mean, today at my age and stage also, yes, I do take criticism even from someone in our office, someone who's probably just graduated, because like I said, everyone is entitled to having an opinion, and then we have a conversation. So yeah.
True. That is actually very encouraging for the students, because they feel that they might not have a say initially, in any form or maybe in the industry. But design is personal. Design has a different perspective to everybody. And I think are you there, Huzefa?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I think we pretty much answered everything to all the questions of students. And I personally would love, and I think Jayanti ma'am, if you'll agree that, we have Huzefa as soon as possible, even in the school when things get better. It's going to be so much fun to have like a physical interaction with students.
It's going to be awesome. I think it was just a really brilliant talk, and the fact that 47 people who've like hung on for and well beyond.
Stay till now, for students, it's an amazing time. I'm amazed today.
I like the fact that I really like the second part of your talk much better, because it was so honest and so real about what actually happens in the world out there, and I think it's relatable to all our students, and I think that's really very encouraging to hear of your journey. Sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you do the right thing, sometimes you don't. I think that's really been really the best takeaway from me. I think I have to fine you in any case, Huzefa. You were not going to use the word architect. You remember? We are talking to designers.
But I was very conscious, every time I was using, I was like, oh my God, the dean has asked me not to use it. I think I'm using it.
A great talk. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thanks, Devika. Thanks, Marina, for coordinating. And
thank you so much.
Thanks, Huzefa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, please stay safe, all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.